A series of unconfirmed dyno tests suggest Mercedes may have created the most efficient engine in modern F1 history. But what almost no one is saying is who benefits the most. Because it might not be Mercedes themselves. Behind closed doors, the real winner could be McLaren. Not just because they'll use the same power unit, but because their car might be the only one built to fully exploit it. There's a reason why FIA engineers were reportedly concerned after reviewing early power delivery data. And why McLaren has refused to announce a launch date for their 2026 car. What's happening here isn't about horsepower. It's about integration, energy control, and silence. Stick around. Because later in this video, we'll reveal the one system that could make McLaren's 2026 car virtually untouchable. Even if Mercedes doesn't win a single race. Officially, Mercedes has said very little. There's been no bold declaration of superiority. No aggressive press release claiming dominance. In fact, team principal Toto Wolff has gone out of his way to lower expectations. "We're never confident," he told reporters in late 2025. "We're people of the half-empty glass, not the half-full." That statement on the surface sounds cautious. But behind it, there's a pattern of movement that tells a very different story. What Mercedes has confirmed, however, is that their 2026 power unit is on schedule, has cleared all FIA compliance stages, and is already being integrated into the test rigs of their partner teams. One of those teams is McLaren. And what makes this moment unique is that, for the first time since 2014, McLaren isn't just a customer. They're a partner who's been building their entire 2026 concept around this engine months in advance. That's not a marketing relationship. That's technical fusion. And according to leaked internal documents, McLaren's engineers received thermal modeling data from Mercedes HPP 6 weeks before Red Bull even finalized their engine cooling architecture. What hasn't been publicly discussed is how Mercedes' success or failure directly alters the landscape for McLaren. Unlike Mercedes' Works team, which is reportedly facing delays in validating their new suspension concept, McLaren has had their entire chassis philosophy locked in since October. Sources suggest the Woking outfit made a conscious decision. Rather than building a car that compensates for unknown engine variables, they built a car assuming the best-case scenario that the engine would be a monster. If that gamble pays off, they won't just be competitive. They'll be the only team on the grid fully optimized to release the engine's maximum potential from day one. And that's where things start to diverge from the official narrative. Because if Mercedes' new unit designated PU26 truly is as advanced as some leaks suggest, the team that stands to benefit the most may not be the one that built it. Why? Because McLaren's current position reigning Constructors' Champion, most win tunnel time of any Mercedes-powered team. And early access to powertrain telemetry gives them an edge in refining how the power is deployed. And in 2026, deployment is everything. Horsepower is no longer king. Control is. The public hasn't seen it yet, but internally, McLaren's technical simulations have revealed something the FIA reportedly flagged in private meetings. Not engine maps. Not torque curves. But thermal asymmetry, the ability of the Mercedes engine to stabilize heat distribution faster than benchmark rivals. Why does this matter? Because it determines how quickly energy can be recovered and redeployed without power drop-offs. If McLaren is designing their entire cooling and aeroflow around this behavior, and if that behavior is unique to Mercedes, then no other customer team can match their integration. What's even more intriguing is what hasn't been explained. Despite dozens of media inquiries, McLaren has refused to reveal its 2026 launch date. They're one of only 3 teams that have not scheduled a public car reveal. There's no concept sketch, no teaser livery, no cryptic video campaign. It's a vacuum. And in F1, a vacuum usually means one thing: they're hiding something. And that something could be a system built specifically to enhance Mercedes' strongest characteristic. Something so tightly integrated into the chassis it can't be revealed until the last possible moment. But before jumping to conclusions, we need to explore the core of the speculation. Not from fan theories or dramatic YouTube claims, but from the technical data itself, what it could mean, and what the FIA isn't ready to say publicly. Because while the engine is legal on paper, its real advantage might come from something far more difficult to police. And that's what we'll get into next. What triggered the first wave of concern wasn't a press release. It wasn't a public test. It was a leak allegedly, from inside the FIA's own homologation process. A draft document circulated briefly among technical delegates in late November. It referenced an anomalous thermal consistency observed during closed dyno sessions involving a Mercedes customer team. That team, according to multiple insiders, was McLaren. The implication? That Mercedes' PU26 engine was producing electric deployment at full capacity for an entire lap, with no thermal degradation. Now, under 2026 rules, that shouldn't be possible. The elimination of the MGUH removes the turbocharger's energy recovery system. Teams are now entirely reliant on the MGUK, tripled in power but constrained by battery charge and braking zones. All early modeling suggested that most teams would suffer from power decay and noticeable drop in electric deployment as the lap progresses. Mercedes, if the leak is to be believed, has circumvented that. Not through illegal means, but through superior thermal management, likely involving a software-integrated control system that dynamically adjusts the battery's discharge curve based on microtemperature readings at the cell level. The phrase that's now circulating in technical circles is predictive torque response. In simple terms, this means the engine doesn't just react to driver throttle input. It anticipates grip levels, tire wear, and energy demand based on a predictive model that evolves lap by lap. This system reportedly uses sensors embedded in the rear suspension housing and even integrates wheel temperature to inform torque delivery. If true, it effectively means McLaren's car can extract full hybrid deployment precisely where others begin to fade. And that's not an acceleration advantage. That's a lap time weapon. Especially on tracks like Suzuka, Silverstone, and Spa where sustained deployment is everything. None of this has been acknowledged by Mercedes, nor by McLaren. Officially, both teams are focused on system reliability and chassis energy integration. But that's what makes the silence so loud. Because when multiple rival teams begin quietly asking the FIA for clarifications on what defines driver input versus software anticipation, it suggests that someone, somewhere, has seen something and doesn't know how to classify it. Is it control? Is it automation? Or is it a new frontier of legal performance extraction? And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because if McLaren has built their car around this dynamic behavior, they might be the only team truly prepared to maximize the PU26. Williams and Alpine, also powered by Mercedes, are reportedly still validating their thermal layouts. Even the Mercedes Works team, dealing with their own aero packaging challenges, hasn't fully committed to the same aggressive assumptions McLaren made months ago. In effect, McLaren bet early and bet big. And the leak suggests they may have bet correctly. But here's the twist most have missed. While the power unit appears to meet every regulation on paper, it might still force a rewrite of how compliance is interpreted. Because if performance advantages are being generated not by power output, but by predictive behavior and adaptive control loops, the FIA is entering uncharted territory. There's no precedent. No clear line between smart programming and illegal automation. And once the cars hit the track, any protest will be reactive too late to stop what's already working. Which leads to the question no one wants to answer publicly. If Mercedes built an engine this advanced, and McLaren was the only team that built a chassis specifically for it, is it even a fair fight? That's what we'll explore next. Because this doesn't just affect McLaren. It threatens to expose a flaw in the very system F1 uses to define legal innovation. And it sets the stage for a regulatory crisis the FIA may not be ready to confront. This is where the story moves beyond engineering. Because what's developing between McLaren, Mercedes, and the FIA isn't a rules violation. It's a vacuum. A regulatory gray area where no one is technically breaking the law. But everyone knows the law isn't ready. That kind of space in Formula One has always been dangerous. And historically, it's where some of the biggest power shifts have begun. Not through dominance, but through ambiguity. Take the example of DAS Mercedes' dual-axis steering system in 2020. Legal at the time, completely within the written rules. Yet controversial enough to force a ban the following year. Now remember how long it took before Ferrari's 2019 fuel flow system was scrutinized. It wasn't outlawed in real time. It was tolerated until it wasn't. That's the pattern. FIA reacts slowly to sophisticated, unseen mechanisms that don't obviously break their own language. And that's what makes McLaren's current situation so dangerous for the grid. They're playing inside a regulatory delay window. And no one can touch them yet. At the center of the current gray area is a phrase that appears repeatedly in the FIA's 2026 hybrid regulations. All energy deployment must be initiated by driver input or pre-approved control systems. Sounds airtight, until you examine what counts as a control system. There's no clear definition. The FIA hasn't stated whether anticipatory software logic, code that adjusts torque based on evolving conditions, counts as driver-independent behavior. And if they haven't defined it, they can't ban it. Which is exactly where McLaren appears to be operating. But the real twist is that the FIA may already be aware of this loophole, and is choosing not to close it, at least not yet. According to a source close to a senior FIA technical delegate, There's internal disagreement about whether cracking down on predictive deployment systems now would constitute an unfair intervention. After all, if Mercedes delivered their power unit legally, and McLaren built their car based on that legality, is it right to move the goalposts after the game has begun? Or is it necessary to preserve competitive balance? These aren't engineering questions anymore. They're political ones. And that's where things start to fracture. Several teams have begun lobbying for technical directives. Those mid-season clarifications that reframe existing rules without rewriting them. But here's the problem. As of now, there's no directive, no clarification, just silence. And that silence is costing time. Because any team looking to copy or counter McLaren's approach would need months of software development, sensor calibration, and reliability testing. In Formula One, time isn't just currency. It's survival. And right now, McLaren has more of it than anyone else. This puts the FIA in a trap of its own making. If they act too soon, they risk accusations of favoring other teams. If they wait too long, they allow McLaren to establish dominance under a loophole the FIA failed to anticipate. And if they remain neutral, they validate the loophole by default. That's how precedents are created in this sport. Not through courtroom arguments, but through silence. And every lap McLaren completes under this silence reinforces the legality of their concept. Meanwhile, there's a subtler power dynamic unfolding in the background. McLaren, long dismissed as a midfield team in the hybrid era, is now uniquely positioned, fully aligned with a rising engine partner, armed with early telemetry, and structurally ahead in integration. If they succeed under these gray conditions, they don't just win races, they win political capital. And in F1, that kind of leverage lasts much longer than a single season. But we're not done. Because the one thing nobody wants to discuss, not in press conferences, not in paddock briefings, not even in technical forums, is this: what happens if McLaren's concept actually works, and no one else can copy it in time? That's what we're about to uncover next. Because this gray area might not remain gray for long. And the moment it turns black and white, some teams could find themselves on the wrong side of the line. The FIA's primary concern isn't what McLaren might be doing right now. It's what this situation represents. Because if McLaren's integration of Mercedes' PU26 power unit sets a precedent, a legal one, then this moment becomes more than just a competitive advantage. It becomes a turning point in how power is interpreted in Formula One. And the governing body knows it. That's why insiders say the tension in Geneva isn't about whether McLaren's concept works. It's about who else might be able to exploit the same gap, and who gets left behind permanently. The fear isn't technical. It's political. Because once a team demonstrates that it can construct an entire performance window within the gray space of undeclared systems, it reveals a fundamental weakness in how the FIA writes rules. Rules designed to be tight, but not fast enough. And in this case, McLaren may have proven that speed of interpretation beats scope of enforcement. They didn't outspend Ferrari. They didn't outpower Red Bull. They simply got there first quietly, efficiently, and with full legal cover. And now, they've put the entire regulatory structure under stress. There's another layer to this, and it's one that the public rarely hears about. Internally, the FIA is facing pressure from multiple stakeholders: engine manufacturers, team principals, technical directors, and commercial rights holders. Each of them sees McLaren's progress through a different lens. Some see it as innovation. Others see it as destabilizing. But what they all agree on silently is that the rules were never meant to handle this level of preemptive integration. And when one team rewrites the boundaries without formal resistance, it creates a hierarchy of influence that isn't based on performance, but on interpretation. This is why, despite mounting pressure, the FIA has yet to issue a directive. Because doing so now would be seen as a retroactive attempt to level the field. It would trigger accusations of bias. It would fracture relationships with engine partners. And it might even draw the attention of Liberty Media, who have no interest in an early season scandal involving a top-tier team. So instead, the FIA is watching, quietly, tracking data, listening to telemetry, comparing McLaren's rollout with internal baselines. But the longer they wait, the more powerful McLaren's position becomes. Not just competitively, but politically. And this is what truly worries the FIA. Control. Not over McLaren, but over the sport itself. Because once a team demonstrates it can outmaneuver the system not by breaking the rules, but by walking faster than the rules can update, the illusion of governance starts to crack. Other teams notice. Engineers notice. And sponsors, who invest millions expecting fair play, begin to question whether the FIA is still the final authority, or just an observer. Meanwhile, McLaren's silence is strategic. They haven't asked for approval. They haven't denied the rumors. They've simply built quietly, legally, and relentlessly toward an interpretation of 2026 that no one else is ready for. And the absence of public statements isn't an oversight. It's a signal. A warning to rivals that if the car performs as predicted, there will be no time to react. Because McLaren won't just arrive in Bahrain with a fast car. They'll arrive with a concept the FIA still hasn't classified. And this brings us to the most uncomfortable question of all. If this system works, and McLaren wins early, what happens next? Do the FIA intervene mid-season and risk looking weak? Do they remain silent and hope the advantage fades? Or do they watch a new order emerge, one defined not by who builds the fastest car, but by who understands the gaps in regulation first? That's the scenario we'll explore in the next section. Because the ripple effects of this aren't just technical, they're structural. And what's coming in 2026 could permanently alter who controls performance, and who defines legality in Formula One.